Hi, I'm Paul Marobella. On behalf of the New York festivals, this is the Creativity and Commerce, Can They Coexist panel. I couldn't be happier to be here with this amazing, esteemed panel of incredible executives from the industry. And we're gonna just kick it off. We're gonna get right into it. I mean, I think what's been interesting about this topic for all of us as we've even come through the business, over the years and in the last, I won't say decades, but I'll say decades for me, is that you can't open a periodical, a magazine, a website without thinking about how technology is impacting creativity. In fact, I have some headlines just from the last couple of days that I'll share just to kind of get us going. The first one is IPG creates a commerce level, C-level role and taps an Accenture exec to lead it across the entire portfolio. Web3 startup partners with Publicis and Dentsu to develop a rewards program powered by tokens. Interesting. Porsche's failed NFT drop is a lesson for brands. One we should talk about. And then here's one that I'm sure we will go deeper on, is that I saw today, is that the world's first fully automated creative agency powered by AI called Uncreative, ironically, which is something I'm sure we'll dive into. So with that, I think the first thing we could do is, I couldn't do the justice of, talking about you. So talk about yourself. Who are you? Who do you work for? What's important to you? And how does technology play a role in your life every day as it relates to creativity? We'll start with you, Chris.
Thanks. So I'm Chris Garbutt. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Vice Media Group and the President of Virtue. And I'm a career creative. I've always loved creativity and I'm always sort of intrigued about the bleeding edge of change. And I think technology is just opening up more creative opportunities. I really do. I think I'm truly excited because, nobody really knows what the answer is and everybody's sort of searching. So these kinds of conversations I think are fantastic to try and figure it out together. But I'm excited about the new opportunities that open up from technology and what technology enables us to do differently, connect in new powerful ways with audiences. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
Natalie.
I'm Natalie Brown at BML Y&R. I'm very curious. So as a creative, curiosity always is what powers and stimulates me. So I think we have to look at this as tools, just like anything else. Like, the computer was probably very scary at the time when that came out and was going to take everyone out of their jobs.
I'm still scared by it.
Right.
The radio.
Exactly. The radio.
Exactly.
There was a voice coming out of it. So I think we just need to look at it as the same thing. It's a paintbrush. It's without, creatives and humans and experiences and insights, they're only going to go so far. Yep. So we have to use them as such. But I'm super excited. I think it opens up new innovation for us every day and allows for more creativity. I don't think it's something that's impeding us.
Love that.
Jamie Robinson, the co-founder and chief creative officer of Joan Creative. And I feel the same way. For me, it's always something, when I see new tech, I'm like, oh, it's something fun to play with. And I think, I know we'll talk about AI later on, but for the way I see it is, it's kind of this magical, interesting new thing to play around and I don't know, maybe to feed and use as a tool. I'm sure that eventually there'll be a Terminator robot that will come and kill us all. And it's just the beginning of Skynet, and we'll look back at this and we'll pull up this and say, remember you thought it was a fun tool? It's not so much. But for now, it's actually something that, you type it in, you see it, ChatGPT, you type it in, you see this magic appear before your eyes. And it's something that is incredibly delightful in my mind. So I'm curious to see where it goes, and I'm enjoying fucking with it now.
Right.
One of the things, for Joan, that I took out of your bio was irregular thinking, delivering exceptional results. And I want to double click on that a little bit when we get into the discussion just around how that applies to commerce and technology as it relates to creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My friend Tyler.
I'm Tyler D'Angelo. I'm Chief Creative Officer of Strawberry Frog. I should think the world technology, when people say, what do you think of it? I don't even know that I know what it is. It's sort of always become like, well, what is it? What do you mean by that? It's such a big term that encompasses so many things. I guess in my own mind, I like to be up against mystery. Mm-hmm. I like to know where there is the answer doesn't necessarily lie. I don't know what it is or where it lies or how to find it. And when I exposed to innovation in some form or another. I'm excited because I think it could take me a little bit further than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
I think like all of us, we like to outdo what's been done. And if we can do that and reimagine things in a new way, that's exciting. I don't like technology when it's about technology. I think that becomes sort of more grounded in something that I can't recognize or understand why I'm doing it. I like when it becomes invisible.
Right.
And once it can become invisible, then I have a little bit more fun with it.
Right.
So,
well, Tyler and I have history together, and I have a little bit of some technology, creative technology tools that we've built. We're going to talk a little bit about those. We'll have some fun with those here in a minute. But I'm Paul Marobella. I've spent the last 20 years really at two companies, what's now known as Accenture Song, for a decade, really working with immersive digital experiences, for Jordan Brand, Nike, Microsoft, Boeing. And then I moved to Havas for almost 10 years, where I was chairman and CEO of North America. And, creativity and technology. And really from a data perspective is when I think about commerce, how are we dealing with data and how's data driving creativity? And left the holding company world and now in a scale up. It's not a startup. And it's been interesting, called VOKAL, where we're a lot of technologists, right? More of a dev technology digital consulting firm, and really introducing that company to creativity. What does creativity mean for a direct-to-consumer brand? What does it mean for a legacy brand that might be a digital laggard? And how can we bring technology and creativity into that mix? So that's been my life for the last year or so, and it's been a different life than the last 20 years, but it's been interesting, and that's why we wanted to have this topic. So I think where we can just jump off, and you touched on some of it, and we'll start with you, Natalie, is how do you feel technology has been impacting creativity? And to that, a follow-on question would be, which areas do you feel like, us as creatives, like where do you feel like it's being impacted the most?
Well, that's a good question. So I think obviously technology is part of everything we do on a daily basis. So I do think, again, I think it helps us leverage and, push what we're doing. I love thinking, like you said, like, yes, here's the thing, but like, how do we flip it on its head and use it in a little bit of a different way than it was, perhaps conceived for? So I love that aspect of it. I do think it makes us think harder. I think it pushes us every day to, where are the boundaries? How far can we go with technology? And then from another perspective, sometimes it's confining, when a lot of it is based on performance. I think sometimes at first as creatives, we're like, this is stifling, like this is sucking the life out of me. And at the same time, you see the results, and that's also exciting. So it's a little bit of like a weird balancing act that I think we have to play with.
And just, I'll ask you a follow-on question, because this should be a conversation. From a creative department perspective and a creative professional perspective, do you see, creatives that embrace technology and data and, as it relates from a commerce perspective, and ones that don't embrace it? And how do you feel? What's the difference, right? How do you feel?
I don't really I think we all embrace it. I'm not working with anyone right now that I don't see not embracing it. I feel like that was maybe like 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Okay.
Like, I think we're way past that at this point.
Got it.
I hope.
Yeah.
So I just think we all have to be on the same. We have to be rowing in the same direction. This is it.
How about, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think we have people that are embracing different aspects of it. I mean, you say technology and it's so broad, because it's like, it could be something like, we have a creative director who was an MIT media arts scholar for new media storytelling, and has created immersive virtual reality films, and that's his passion. And then we have some people that are passionate about creating through social and TikTok, and are really excited about that, because that is technology as well. And so I think it's so fragmented to say technology. And then we have actually, by the way, I have one creative director who is obsessed with data and wants to see how things are performing constantly, which is kind of weird, but I love it about him. And so that to me feels fantastic. And what I love about the way that the landscape is emerging right now is that there's so many places to play. You're not going to find one person that is an expert in every single part of tech, right? Yeah. So what you do look for are people that are curious and are looking and trying to invest in something and are learning and can bring that back to the agency. And so that's how we structure our department.
And so when you have, because you said it, right? It's so broad.
Yeah.
Technology and commerce can move into so many different areas. And it's important for us to stay current and relevant and stay in the mix on it. And we'll talk a little bit more, but since you touched on it, I'll go in there.
Yeah.
Do you have a methodology or a process or, to help your team be current and start to apply those ideas for clients?
Yeah, I mean, well, the methodology is, hey, that's a cool thing you talked about. Can you tell everybody else about it? So it's not it's not very technological, but we definitely have people. Our team instructs the rest of the larger team about it. We take it and do roadshows to clients and say, hey, listen, can you come talk about this? It is infectious, And then one other thing that we do at Joan is we're really interested in culture and how culture shapes the work that we do. So every Saturday morning, it used to be Friday night, but then people would go out and have a little bit of fun. We send around a newsletter that has all the cool breaking things that are happening in culture. And a lot of times it includes ways that people are using technology. It's a newsletter. Anybody can sign up for it. We call it Breakfast in Bed.
That's cool.
If you're interested in signing up for it, look for a link, I think, in our socials. But no, it's also not safe for work always. But it is open for you to see.
I like the idea of bringing it to clients. Last week we did a presentation around direct to consumer, and for a legacy tool brand that was looking to move or is looking to move to the direct to consumer world, and it was a really interesting presentation that we're presenting this idea of commerce content to a legacy tool brand that didn't understand what D2C meant. I had to spell it out.
Oh no!
So, but I think that's okay, right? I think that's our role as consultants is helping brands understand how their product mix or their service mix can be presented either in a new way or a new digital revenue line. That's our job. And I think that the agencies have been shifting to be more consultancies, to that point. And I think in the technology and commerce world, that feels like a place for us to live. I don't know, Chris, how you feel about that?
I agree with that. I think our roles as creative leaders are changing because creativity is becoming democratized. I think that's the big shift that technology is enabling. So like most people in the future will probably have the power of industrial light and magic in their hands to create what they have in their head. And if you look what's happening in culture, communities are creating commerce and livelihoods out of making. So our roles are different. Our roles are choreographing that in a way. First, understanding where the heat is in culture, where audiences are truly engaged, what they're actually making and doing, what they value, and letting that audience lead the marketing path in a way. So we say at Vice Media Group, let culture lead. And that's where we always start. We always start by really digging into the triggers in culture, the passions, what that powerful value exchange can be between a brand and an audience. Because we believe if you give an audience something of value, that's quality, not necessarily quantity at scale, but quality, they'll reciprocate. They'll give you something back in return. And technology is offering up new ways to connect.
Right.
And it's also inviting audiences in to make and co-create with brands.
Right.
So that's an exciting frontier as a creative leader to be involved in. Because again, it's about understanding the dynamics of that, keeping up to speed with that, and then being able to connect all those fragmented dots so they add up to something that's bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, I've always admired and been a bit envious of Vice's and Virtue's access to Vice's content, and the ability to have a platform like that can, to your point, shape culture and create new celebrities and new stars and even new memes and the variety of things that Vice has the global reach and the power to do. Can you talk a little bit about that, just as it relates to, in your Virtual and your Vice role and the access to the data that you have and the ability to integrate that?
It's fun. I got to admit, I've come from more of a traditional holding company background, and being part of a youth culture media company, it's exhilarating because it's an opportunity to build a really new model. And again, starting with our platforms, we've got this huge youth culture audience engaged and in a two-way conversation. So we can draw real insights out of that and triggers. And we really do understand where the world's going to move next. We can almost predict that in, different ways. So up front, that informs the direction of the creative. That gives us more of a North Star to point towards when we're planning a comms plan or a way to exchange those value exchanges along the journey of a brand. And then it also gives us access to communities, like from celebrities to creators to more grassroots communities at the base. And a big part of the future of marketing, we believe, is in building community brands. So gone are the days of building these sort of monuments of marketing and broadcasting them in paid media and interrupting audiences' attention span. I mean, people are migrating to gaming platforms and they're investing their attention in all these other places. So it's kind of pretentious to think that we are that important that people would care.
Right.
We've got to find ways for brands to show up that actually truly do offer something of value to those audiences. And so we say bring the audiences in to help shape those brands, and also in so doing, those brands not only reflect culture, but they actually help shape culture as well.
I thought it was interesting me there is, do people care? After I left Havas, I spent 2 years on the client side. And when you spend time on the client side after a career on the agency side.
Only 2 years? How'd that happen?
I'll tell you why. I'm an agency guy. That's why. And you realize pretty quickly that people don't care. That we're
they don't.
We've just, been in this business 30 years. Like we're in an echo chamber a little bit, as an industry. And when you see it from the other side, and maybe some of you have as well, you realize that you, as a CMO of a big company, you spend a very small amount of your time actually thinking about creativity. You're thinking about commerce, which was really the pivot for me. Was like, we're looking at numbers every day. How do we move? What was the volume? What was the case volume? What was attributable to that? What wasn't attributable to that? And then you start to have empathy for CMOs. So now I like to feel like I'm a way more empathetic agency person than I was 2 years ago. So it's just a little twist, because you touched on it a little bit there, and I think it's important for us to talk about.
It's funny with like what we have behind us here, where people used to sit and find that, that time where their show was going to be on, their radio program was on, like they tuned in for that. And we're like trying to intrude now, and find ways to not actually be intrusive and be a part of the day to day. So it's such a big shift from, I'm just laughing because of what's behind us here.
Well, you sit around it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
and you see the old pictures of the big radios, everybody sitting
that was it. You had one thing to
the
stare
radio
at.
show, whether it was the radio show,
exactly.
I mean, thankfully, way before our time, but we heard about it.
We heard about it. And the Ovaltine commercial comes on, right? I mean, you can't fast forward through it. Sort of like OTT now, right? You watch Paramount Plus and, watching the Mayor of Kingstown and an ad comes on and you really can't fast forward through it. And so it all reminds me of those radio days, like trying to
Well, I know. And of course, we should be empathetic to that, but we're like, I want to fast forward through it. I'm curious, having been an agency person and going client side, did you find a lot of conversation within the client organization about brand versus performance, the importance of building brand versus the performance?
Such a good question.
Yeah, we'll get into that a bit, but it was the discussion was mostly around performance.
Yeah.
And how are we driving penetration of the brands into certain channels?
Yeah.
How are we driving volume? What's market share? I mean, some pretty recognizable rolling paper brands, actually, believe it or not, a multi-billion-dollar company. Yeah. Great brands.
Sounds like a
it was
great
an awesome category. Great brands, but oftentimes these brands hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
They were French brands, Job and Easy Wider and OCB, but building a brand and spending millions of dollars on building a brand and having that discussion with a ownership team that hadn't done that previously is a hard discussion.
Yeah.
And it was more around how many cases did we move today? How many cases are we going to move tomorrow?
But at least that's a brand that's established and they've been around. Sometimes I find myself working on new brands that don't want to establish the brand and are more concerned about the performance marketing. So I think it's like finding that balance, and how everyone wants to see the results like yesterday, but they do go hand in hand. You have to know who you're talking to before you give them your money.
Right. It's a great question. I mean, part of our strategy, my strategy at the time, was to go more direct to consumer because these brands hadn't had any competition for decades. Yeah. And all of a sudden now there are all these startup brands that were coming at these big established brands and chipping away from a market share perspective. So you had to build brand.
You have to.
But at the same time, you had to be on Amazon.
Yeah.
Then you had to figure out how to sell. Was the margin better if you were selling on your website? So the idea of building a brand, creativity, tapping into that culture, because you all were like, whoa, it's amazing. I mean, it's really an incredible culture. But how do you tap into that culture and stay relevant when you have all these newer brands that are popping up around you? Is a really fascinating challenge.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. What was when you were doing that? I know you, someone who likes creativity. When you're stuck in that little cone that you were in, you're like, did you find yourself valuing it more or less when being on that side?
Performance or brand, or just advertising.
Creativity. Period.
Oh, I mean, I valued it more. I mean, the idea that you could have these beautiful brands that were, one was from 1838, it's a French brand, like that just was born in art, was born in posters, from, France, and to be able to tap into that DNA of the brand, but then do it in a way that could drive performance, to me is what was exciting about it. And, but you realize that money isn't infinite.
Yeah.
And that the biggest takeaway from me was that CMOs are under pressure sometimes that we don't see. And they spend 10% of their day thinking about the agencies, thinking about the work, when we think about it 24 hours a day and think they do too.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I'll say, just to build on your question, Tyler, because we haven't gotten to you yet, is it's hard to keep up when you're on the client side. It's hard to keep up, stay relevant, stay modern, what's cool, what's interesting, what's the next thing in performance marketing, how is Instagram changing their algorithm from a direct-to-consumer perspective? All of that becomes, washes over you because you start to, you're just not thinking about it because you're thinking about the manufacturing of the product, the packaging, how many did we move in that particular channel that day? So the takeaway for me was on the agency side now, back to the agency side, is the empathy around that, is to make sure that our clients are understanding what's happening, what's next, especially as it relates to technology in commerce, because a big brand organization that's shifting the performance, they're struggling with understanding the direct-to-consumer channel. And they probably have a direct-to-consumer brand that's chipping away at market share. And I do want to talk about that during this panel, is any DTC brands or any experience that you have and how that's different from a big brand-based brand marketer. So let's talk about you, my friend, Tyler D'Angelo.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about, I when I think of Tyler, we've heard creative technologists sort of bandied about, in our industry over the years. We have history together. And when someone asked me to describe Tyler, that's how I describe him. A creative technologist. He would never describe himself that way.
Running away from that description.
He would never describe himself that way.
I've spent most of my career trying to push that side out so no one ever said it.
So why
it's good this isn't going to be broadcast.
So so tell me, but I want the world to get into your brain for a second, because you think about technology in a way that impacts an idea. It's embedded in the idea versus supports the idea. So you just talk about that a little bit, and where you've been, and you've been at Strawberry Frog for a bit. So how you're integrating it at Strawberry Frog, and how y'all are doing it. I
just personally, I think, and I joke about that, but really when I started, and I was talking about this, and we could link this to AI because that's the most relevant thing we could talk about. I was talking about this the other day where we were discussing, what do we do in the creative review, or not creative review, the creative regroup this week. We get together. I said, we were going to talk about the same thing we did last week, which is AI. I said, well, why? Well, there's a fucking Martian that just landed in the backyard. Yeah. We're going to talk about that Martian for a while. I don't know how we would talk about anything besides the alien ship that just landed.
You can't sweep it under the rug.
So we got it. But that excites me. I like when that happens. But I think from the beginning of my career, and I was joking about this, is AI right now is the doors is come open. Is the doors now just a little bit open for new people to come into our industry and to become an expert, something that's highly valued very fast. Mm-hmm. The way I got in was when social media started becoming, and I just said I was a social media expert, and I didn't fucking have a clue what that meant. But I knew, I'm like, the door just opened for me to say something, to get a job.
Now you gotta catch up.
Now once I got the job, I was like, I gotta figure out a lot of shit.
You gotta get an iPhone.
It was way before the iPhone.
Wait, that wasn't when we started together.
No, that was my first job.
Oh, it was us. Okay, we started on the same day at Havas.
But no, in the very beginning, when I was a kid, that was how I got in, and because of what was important to me from the beginning is I think people at that point would like ask me how to turn their computer on, like as a creative technologist. They'd be like, I don't know how my email works. Can we get Tyler to come over here? I'm like, I don't.
Not IT.
It made me crazy.
Yeah.
It made me because I'm like, I want to be a creative.
Right.
I want to be a writer. I want the craft, not the technology to define who I am. It's so annoying. And so, not that it's a bad thing, but I think it's important that the idea that it's been the same way as getting to an idea 1,000 years ago and 1,000 years in the future. That's not going to change. You got tension, you got simplicity, you got truth. You got those are go ahead, kids. There's the ingredients for a great idea. But if you take technology, you still start with an idea, you can create some magic and you can do things that haven't been done before. And you can show your parents they want to put it on the refrigerator, which is what I think I continue my whole life trying to do, is get my idea on the refrigerator still. But I think that's what's exciting is, like I was saying before, is the mystery of how does technology not become the story, but how does it create the magic on a concept that is just a great idea, that is you could explain to anybody.
Here's my theory. Is you've seen it with like some of these apps like Lensa, and suddenly everybody's posting their selfies.
For a day.
But it's kind of novel for a bit, but then it becomes a sea of sameness.
Yes.
So within a very quick amount of time, I think a lot of the creativity that's going to be generated from AI is going to become commoditized. And I think people are always seeking rarity, originality, scarcity. So creativity at the end of the day will be the guiding force behind, like you said earlier, like that's the ultimate goal, is like how you actually apply that technology and how you actually use it differently or feed it differently to like, and I think that's where brands will still cut through, because otherwise you're fighting in a tactics trap against other brands. And this goes back to this year is going to be an amazing year. Everybody's going to be so focused on effectiveness and ROI because of the looming recession we're all heading into. But time and time again with hundreds of research studies, you've got to get the balance right between the upper funnel kind of brand building work about awareness and consideration, and not forget about that and neglect that in service of short-term gains. And you can see it with brands when they've taken their foot off the gas in recessions, like McDonald's in the 90s, when Wendy's and Burger King stole huge market share from them because they stopped investing in brand and even some of their retail work. So be careful, because it's very tempting with the instant gratification of D2C to go for the sale along the consumer journey. We talk about customer journeys and we map it out, but there's always that end goal of getting the sale done.
Right.
But think about it more in terms of the long-term benefits of building the brand, being able to increase the value of that brand, being able to stretch the price of that brand over time. That's ultimately where we'll win. And it comes back to the balance between commerce and art, right? It's a perfect balance. I think we've got to, I love the phrase media arts. I think it's such a brilliant way to sum up what we need to hold the line on. It's about media arts. It's about getting both right.
Even the things that we consider art are commerce. It's so funny. I was just thinking about how, and it was actually when we were talking about the technology and how storytelling can evolve, I was thinking back to the time I went to Disney World for the first time this fall. And boy, I kicked and screamed. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they've been asking me since they were babies, can I go to Disney? I said, no, I'm not going to Disney. I went there, and I swear to God, I found myself crying, like totally moved to tears at the beauty of the storytelling that was there, which I cannot believe. It sounds so dorky, but I was on the Avatar ride, and I'm like, oh, there's like water that comes on your face, but also there's tears. I'm like, oh, it's just the water, it's not my tears. But what I would say is, who could argue that art is not commerce, like personified? Like it is, like it is there. And I think that the marriage between art and commerce is one that is going to live together, and creativity and commerce, and whether or not we come at it from commerce angle, making creative, or creative, making it commerce, it doesn't matter. It's the same fucking thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you both said about brands at the top of the funnel that are building awareness and consideration don't always own the transaction, right? We've probably all worked on CPG brands, beer brands that don't own the data record, right? They have to either buy it from Walmart or Home Depot, or they have to go out and figure out a way to get first-party data. first party data is one of the reasons the drive to DTC, right? So how do we, as creatives, use that first party data to better tell stories in ways that aren't the broad-based 30-second spot, but do it in a way that maybe is over time or is more personalized, more targeted? Do you guys have any thoughts on that or any examples you might want to share?
I got a different perspective. My wife owns a brand called Jane Doe, which is a, and I hate this term because I just think it diminishes piece of it, but it's a female empowerment company. I just don't like that. It makes it sounds weird and small and something, but it's based in a community of women that really support each other, and the workout is the entry point to much bigger things that they talk about. So I was really inspired by watching her and her business partner do this. But when this started 6 or 7 years ago.
Hasn't been that long.
It's been a while, yeah. It was like when watching it, I'm like, I got a very different perspective. Like I'm used to working with millions of dollars.
Right.
And you could do lots of things and, that didn't work, but when you're doing direct to consumer, and even in that microcosm of saying this little tiny brand, you get a much different appreciation for where you put your attention and how you're bringing people in to actually use marketing to grow a brand in a way, in a balance sheet.
Right.
So, and if you don't have media dollars, and you can't make a lot of mistakes because you'll bury this brand. And so the community, that's where it linked with some of the work that we do. Strawberry Frog's been a movement agency for 25 years, since before that was a term. And I've seen the power of unifying people in a like-minded way and being able to give them value in something that they want that links to their values. So I think that that's where community comes in providing that community something that does strengthen that value set, or that does strengthen something where they believe in. Right. Where yes, commerce can. That's when I think if you can do that with commerce and they can become part of that brand or part of that story that you're creating, that I can see it start to work that way.
You almost have to be more creative with a smaller budget.
Much more.
Right? I mean, especially when that dollar is your dollar.
Well, I love the tiny little box. I hate thinking outside the box. I'm like, give me the tiniest itsy bitsy little box you can, because that's when the creative shit starts to happen.
Right.
When you're like, do whatever you want. I'm like, holy shit. I don't even know where to start.
Right.
So I think that's what I don't mind, and edit this out. I don't mind when a client says we don't have a lot of budget. Like, edit
sorry, I don't
out.
like that you said
I
that.
still like it, but I don't think it's a negative. I don't think it's like okay, how do we get great? How do we have a great output? We just have to rethink how we do it. Because I've seen them in the most amazing creative ideas that cost nothing. There was zero. It was a kick-ass press release that went out that was baked in creativity in how but didn't cost anything.
Right.
So now you can't always do that, but I think that you're able to create great results for a brand using creativity to supplement if you don't have a lot of money and you are looking at a balance sheet. So I think looking at a smaller brand where you really you have to get sharpness and focus on how are you going to create value, really balance sheet value out of a creative idea. Yeah. It helps to sort of frame that, so when you're working a bigger brand, you can have that empathy.
Does anybody want to build on that?
Sorry, I didn't mean
go ahead.
Jump in again, but I'm going to flip it to one of the biggest brands in the world, Apple. But I learned a lot from the Shot on iPhone campaign that when I was a child we worked on. And really what they came down to is figuring out the different value exchanges we wanted to enable or affect with our audience. Like from equipping them with the right tools in the store to, instead of like saying how creative the iPhone is and Apple is, like celebrating the audience and giving them the real estate of the brand to shine. And then connecting them to one another as well to create a conversation, and ultimately building a platform where your users of your product become the sellers for you. Right. And that's modern marketing in a way. Yeah. And it's back to this concept of value exchange planning. Like, what's the reciprocity? What's the give to get? And you can figure that out ahead of the time. You can say, okay, we want to teach them in store about what you can do with the iPhone. Then we want to inspire them so they give us back beautiful ideas and content. Then we want to celebrate them so that it spreads and grows and gains momentum to the point where you've got a model where you've got your audience producing content and marketing for you. And the ROI in that is huge.
You've built
And
a
also, by the
community.
way, they're the media channel too. They're not just producing
Exactly.
marketing content.
Exactly.
They're
Right.
also your media channel because they're posting,
They have an audience.
which is amazing. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And that to me is a good example of the use of technology. It's not the end result, it's celebrating the technology, it's celebrating the humanity behind
I love
it.
that.
But a lot of times it's hard to get the clients to see it that way. They're like, what are the features?
Yeah.
No one will know what to do in that
Yeah,
booth
it's
with
true.
the phone if we don't tell them the 156 features that the phone has. So I think it's finding that balance so that we can get that out of our clients
It's true.
and get that product.
And how do you find that balance? Like, what's your methodology for finding that balance?
Well, your next client, no.
You're gonna put it back on
I'm
me?
like, wait a minute. Look, I think trust is a huge part of what we do every day. So building trust and really just explaining. I think, you have to see the value. Show them, sometimes it's other cases, but Apple's always a great case because to me, it's maybe not necessarily the product itself that's what is getting everyone to use it as much as like the user experience. They've simplified it. They made it so much easier. Like, the Zune might have been a better MP3 player back then, but we all loved
Zune. Wow,
See?
you pulled that
Zune
out.
pulled that out for you. But like I think we all just loved that interface and that experience. So that is what brought us in.
I think also helping them to remind them that they're actually human beings that are
Yeah.
going to be seeing it
Yeah.
and trying to appeal to clients and anybody that you interact with that, can you look at this like a person who doesn't necessarily want your laundry list of stuff, wants to be moved. Now, allow yourself to be moved. Are you moved by it? If you're not moved by it, that is a fair comment.
Yeah.
If you don't, by the end of what I'm showing you or interacting with or giving you to interact with, understand the point, that is a fair comment. But if you are asking me to if you're asking a regular old human being to hold 18 features into their heads, they're not going to listen and they're not going to be moved and they don't give a shit, honestly. No one is waiting for your advertisement in any
Great
format.
point.
Yeah.
It's a great
Well,
point.
and to build on that, one of the accounts that I'm currently working on is all B2B. And everyone was like, oh, you're really going to work on that? And I'm like, they are people.
Yeah.
Sure.
They are business people, especially when you're speaking to a small business or a mid-sized business. They've refinanced their homes to, build that business, or they're using their personal credit card to still, buy things for work. And I always show my phone. I'm like, they use their phone the same way we do. They're business people, but they're scrolling through Instagram. They're on TikTok.
Yeah.
So we need to speak
They're
to them.
consumers too.
Right. Where they are. It's like, everyone's like, oh, B2B, we got to be over here. I'm like, no.
B2B can be sexy.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
It can be sexy.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the Apple campaign because my next question is around, your thoughts on a campaign that you think uses commerce and creativity and data well. And I'll start while you're thinking about it. I just love the Spotify campaign.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, being Tyler knows this,
Such
a bit of a
good
data
data.
guy too. They use their audience to tell the story, but did it in a super creative way, right? So Spotify Wrapped is one thing, but my favorite part of the campaign are the billboards.
The out-of-home, so good.
Where it's like, and I have one of the headlines, which was, somebody made a root canal playlist probably because I never made a flossing playlist, right? Just the idea of this being in the data, and then what do you do with that data to actually tell a story creatively in the analog world, which I find that campaign to be so fascinating.
I'm going to build off of this, which
Please.
is another Spotify campaign, which was so interesting. I'm sure you guys saw it. Was the one, and they picked up a lot of metal last year. It was the one that targeted CMOs by creating. So they were using Spotify was using their own data and their own media to understand where CFOs would be. CMOs. Target the CMOs with custom songs based on their playlist that they had written about those CMOs.
Whoa.
And so it was a really fun, I think, use of targeting, media targeting data from the playlists, and
Smart.
really cool.
The amount
CMOs were
of
a good
data
one.
that they have
It's
is
incredible.
insane. And even if you've worked on, I'm sure with on pitches, they will come in and give you ideas for we could have that store only play music that we know of the people that typically,
So good.
come into that store. So they will only hear the music that's on their playlist.
amazing.
It's like,
What?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Jamie, it was a slip, but I actually like the CFO campaign. I think that could be.
Was there a
You said CFO.
Like a CFO campaign. CFO campaign. Very much like
writing the check.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, hey,
Love song.
how about you buy some media?
Lighten up. Exactly.
Lighten up. You
Open
like
up that
this.
checkbook. Let's go.
So I was like, no one sang to me before. Actually, maybe that's the
maybe
key.
that's it. I like pitching that
I'm
idea.
going to try that tomorrow.
We talked about AI. We talked about Meta, VR, AR, data. How do we think about retooling or shifting or thinking about our talent, thinking about our capabilities, thinking about people that we might bring into our organizations that, for us, we've tended to hire talent from high growth startups that had Series A, Series B exits, right? Etsy, Peloton, Fanatics, and they bring a completely different perspective.
That's cool.
And pair them with folks like us that come from the consulting, the agency side, services side. But together, it's a chocolate and peanut butter combination, because a lot of times those folks don't understand how to pitch an idea necessarily to a client. So that's where we come in. How do you guys think about what we're going to have to do over the next 24, 36 months? Jamie, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is, and I don't have the luxury of a huge company, we're still, 80 some odd people. But when I pick somebody, or we pick somebody to come into our world, whether they're in strategy or account management or creative or production, we look for in addition to the basics, is there something that they can come and they can teach the rest of us? Can they bring something in to teach the rest of us? I'll also say that I think there's millions of people out there in the world who are experts in this field and who are already playing with it, who are happy to share their knowledge in like a guest speaker capacity. We're bringing in an AI artist, and they're going to come talk to us about Midjourney, and we're going to have a competition and see who can make some art for the new space that we have upstairs. I love that idea. And so to me, that feels like, tap into the experts, get people in to come talk to you, and see if you can then follow up quickly with your people about how do we now apply this to our real work that we're doing in a day-to-day. Because what you don't want is that you just say it, and then you're like, oh, that was cool. And then it's like, now let's go back to making TV spots. That's not that you want to say, how do we now really can go in? Not that there's anything wrong with TV spots, but how do we now go in and apply this to what we do on a day-to-day basis? Are the things with our clients that we can bring in right now?
There's I think to that point, when you say, who do we bring in? I think we're not a giant agency as well, but I think I have the people right now that could do this. I don't need new people, because the people that, but I do think what's important is the education. It's our responsibility to not leave anybody behind, or at least give them the chance.
Yes.
So if you don't do it after I've given you the chance, well, that's on you. But I do believe that I want every single person in that agency, no matter what, because there are diverse backgrounds, and I think the diversity of that background is so important, especially right now that this is a different topic, that AI should just start shooting us the same thing made by the same 20-year-old dudes, dudes in college. But what is important is that if I've got some, younger people who maybe don't have the same traditional experience, or have people who have more traditional experience, right now, what we're doing is taking each person, saying we're going to sit down right now and we're going to go through this to break through that first wall. Mm-hmm. I want you to know how to do this. I don't, because when you say right now, AI is such a weird, scary, we need rebranding on that word to begin with, So it's because it's very paralyzing. What does that mean? I don't know what that is. I'm scared to get into it, but we can't leave anybody behind right now. So it's pick people who are embracing it in the agency, set up Zooms, go into the office, and just sit down with someone who does it to teach them this technology, because it's such an important time for them for us to learn it and move forward with it. And at the same time, bring in the experts, bring in people who inspire us to take another step forward. I was just talking right before a panel earlier with this photographer, Tim Tatter. He's a super traditional photographer, and went to art school. And just recently, I was looking at his Instagram, and he'd just come up with this series that's all AI. And I was like, oh shit, it was so good. It's only good because he's a traditional photographer.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so, because the lighting, the composition, the consistency of a series, it was only because he's an amazing, and I love that he comes from such traditional background, and has now made this uniquely his own, that it's special. It's really special. So I would love to bring someone like that in to share that as someone who you would think would be pushing against it, but has now shown you there's always that person out there that will take the other view, and you're like, fuck.
Back to
like it's so I like that.
Back to this democratization of creativity. It's crazy to think we can hire all of this talent in-house inside the four walls of an agency, because it's just like fragmenting and becoming so specialist. So I think the future model of any creative company is an inside-outside model, where you've got to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, where the talent is, and then build that roster and that access to that collective. And then again, back to this choreography thing of actually understanding what the North Star is of a brand, what the platform is, how to add up all the components to a greater whole, and then choreographing the right talent pool. It's, COVID accelerated this. Like it forced a lot of talent out of agencies, and they're living in the middle of the countryside now. And I mean, I've got designers working from the middle of Spain, but they're the best designers in the world, right? And then like the French luxury experts don't want to work full time anymore. They're too good for that, and they've got other interests in life too.
So cool.
I love the fact that we're in this sort of moment in history where we can access anyone.
Yeah, I love that.
Technology enables that too, right?
Yeah. I don't know, Natalie, you want?
I think it's working outside of just the norms of where we looked for talent before, so talent can come from anywhere. And I think like when I'm looking to hire, it's not like what other agencies have they been at? Like, it doesn't have to be that, it could be they worked anywhere. Like it's what have you made is really what it's about today. And then going back to your photography, example, I think back to like when we went from film to digital cameras, and how many photographers were like, I'm not jumping on that bandwagon. And like today, when's the last time you saw a photographer? So I think it's the same thing. It's like, it is a tool. It's a tool. We can't be afraid of it. Like, embrace it. I love the education. I do think like it's daily. It can't be like even like weekly. The education, like you think you're like, I'm on top of it. I know it. And then like you wake up the next morning, it's like, oh fuck, they came up with something new. So it's like, it certainly is something that's daily, but I love like bringing everyone on the journey. I
think even going, I have two teenage daughters. Yes, that's why my beard is gray.
Me too.
18 and 15. And they're right brain. They're very creative, but they're both screenagers. And I worry that their creativity, while my youngest shows it in TikTok for sure. I mean, she's going to be a content creator. There's no doubt about it. What advice would we have for that generation? I don't mean the generation that's coming out of college now, but even the creatives that are going into college or going into art school, or just are going to go right into a career, from a creativity perspective. They're spending less time maybe doing the things that we did.
Right.
Drawing, illustrating, but are putting their creativity into other areas, or so we think. Do we have any advice for them or any thoughts as they come up?
I mean, I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, like I mentioned before, and I don't think I have to give them any advice. I think they have to give me the advice. Yeah, I mean, they are prolific. They are interested. They are. I mean, whether it's creating in my, like they still love Minecraft and Roblox, but like my one daughter just said, I'm going to be an architect. I said, why? She goes, because I'm building in Bloxburg, like this amazing. And people keep telling me how wonderful my thing is. I'm like, you're not talking online, are you? It's a stranger. She's like, no, I'm just kidding. I'm like,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You said that was your takeaway.
Bloxburg.
Anyway, but she loves it, right? So I think that they are like fierce little fearless creators.
I love
what
that.
I'm so freaking encouraged by is this generation is not growing up with somebody saying you are creative and you are not. Every single one of them is being told that they are creative, and they're all using it in their own way. And so I just feel like I got no advice for the kids. They got it for us.
I love that. Yeah. What do you all think?
I think they're their own media, and they've got access to all the channels they want to broadcast their creativity and make whatever they want with the right tools. And there's not much I can tell them besides just do what you love and become a specialist at that, like really excel.
I love that.
And get it out there and help shape the evolution of creativity.
Yeah. And experiment. I mean, that's what they're doing on Snapchat and TikTok and least I
Everyone's
think
a
that's
creator.
what they're doing on Snapchat. I can't tell because it goes away, but
176 million TikToks watched every minute.
Yeah.
it's incredible.
76,000 Instagram photos shared every minute. I mean,
It's
it's crazy to think that we own creativity. It's not like that anymore.
But it's also with, I'd say, advice is it's, if you're really looking to make a career out of being a content creator or whatever it is, don't forget, out of that number that you just mentioned, infinitesimally, that number is garbage junk that's
Qualities.
out there and you will not make a
And no
living
one's
at
watching.
it. Right? So I still think the principle of you have to outwork every single person around you. Those sort of values, that ain't gonna change because even though you say, "Oh, that person, I love that person on TikTok," I guarantee you they are working their ass off every day, 14
doubt
hours a
about
day, scripting it ahead of time, trying anyone at that level. If you want to get to that level, whatever you're doing, I don't care if it's picking up trash. You have to be the
Takes effort.
very, very best, and you can't settle for anything less than fucking perfection and at least chasing it. And I think that's what. I think the ease of creating something with the perception to yourself that it's great can easily misguide you that you are good at it.
right.
Everything takes
Right.
practice. I don't care how. So I would just say, that's my advice as an asshole old person.
okay.
I'm still saying like you've got to work harder than anybody else around.
I want to
you.
do some push-ups after
Yeah,
that pep
yeah.
talk right there. You got
Kids
me all
these
fired up.
days.
Let's go.
I know. I'm now that person.
So no panel is complete without a prediction, of course. So I'm gonna ask. The last question would be, any big predictions for 23? What are we going to be talking about in Cannes? What's going to be as it relates to technology and commerce and creativity? Is there anything that you want to predict here on the panel?
Yeah, tricky question, right? It's early in the year still. Most of the Cannes work only shows up in the next 2 months. Funny enough, for New York festivals, even more importantly. But I think it's a race, right? It's a race who uses the tools the best way.
Yeah. Like that.
Or in the most unique way.
Right.
I think that's what it is. It's not necessarily what it was engineered to do, but how you've used
Most
that
clever way, creative
in
way.
a different way.
I think that the if we can treat this with the right amount of compassion and the right amount of empathy, I do think that these tools will start actually proliferating through creative departments even more than they have. I think it will be key for us, and this is not a award show prediction because, like, you're right, it is only January, but I do think that for our industry, the fear will come down, and curation and creativity beyond the grunt work will start to rise. And we may actually see ourselves go into whole new spaces that
Yeah, I love
are
that.
beyond our dreams. So that's my optimistic prediction.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I have trouble predicting. I don't know. But
That's
what
an honest answer.
I think what we can do is say, especially with something that's changing so fast, so quickly, what is the first stage what's our vision we should be setting our eyes on right now? And that's learning. We're in a period of learning. And we should use the liberation of that, because nobody knows shit about this right now at scale, that use this opportunity to inspire yourself and learn as much as you can until the next phase starts. And I'd say it's a very freeing time right now to be able to experiment and learn and not have to be the biggest expert in the world. Because I think that's when a vision will start to show itself. I don't know that I have it yet because it needs to be revealed.
Yeah, mine revolves, it's not as sexy as yours, but mine revolves around, I would say, big legacy brands, big legacy businesses behaving more like D2C businesses. And it's a lot of what I'm seeing every day, often because private equity gets involved or there's some things happening, but you're having to see different skill sets, different perspectives where brand and performance and creativity and product design actually become even more important. As we think about the direct-to-consumer space, product design is so important. It is the creativity in some ways. So I think this year we'll start to see more brands that we work on asking about how do we become more direct-to-consumer, even if they're not.
They have to act more like consumers.
Yes,
Actually,
exactly.
you just actually gave me a new prediction, which is I think brand will become more important than ever, because one thing I'm noticing, I don't know if you guys are, but all the Midjourney art, for example, is all starting to become very same. I think you guys were touching on this before, and I think brand will become actually even more important than ever.
I love that. And on that, thank you so much. That was an incredible conversation. I can't wait to take the tidbits out of that and bring it on to what we're doing every day in the work. So I really appreciate you all. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was
Great.
awesome. Thanks.